This is the Infinite Receiving podcast, helping conscious leaders tap into a wealth of abundance across all areas of your life and business. I'm Susie Ashworth, and I'll be sharing with you how you can upgrade your reality through quantum transformation, because you are ready for infinite receiving. Hello, you gorgeous human being. You are really going to enjoy this episode. I want to introduce you to an entrepreneur and transformational leader, Shirin Etessam. In this conversation, we dive deep into the principles she shares in her book, Free to Be. And well, I'm not going to spoil the key theme, but I think that you are going to love the permission slip she gives us when she talks about how to explore our relationship with purpose, our soul work. We talk about the difference between spirit and soul. We talk about the triggers and activations that we get from our kids. We talk about being a work in progress. It's a really, really beautiful episode. So without any further ado, let's get on with it. Hello, you gorgeous human being. It is Susie Ashworth here, and you are listening to the Infinite Receiving podcast. And I'm really excited because this is the first recording of the new year, and I have got a juicy one for you. I am going to be kind of pulling back the curtain with an incredible human being called Shirin Etessam. Shirin, welcome to the Infinite Receiving podcast. How the devil are you?
I am doing really well. I am just starting my day as you are easing into the evening.
Yeah. Where exactly are you in the world right now?
So I live in Marin County, California, which is just north of Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco Bay Area. And we split our time between Marin and Napa. We have a beautiful place in Napa that we got during the pandemic, and it was the perfect staycation ever.
That sounds like an incredibly charmed life, and actually helps me segue in very, very quickly to the fact that your background is quite remarkable. We were talking just before we came online, and you were sharing about a friend, and you described her as a baller. In my eyes, you are an absolute baller. You know, you have created, you've produced, you've done incredible TV shows, you have your book now, Free to Be. And there is many synergies actually between what you are teaching and sharing when it comes to helping people liberate themselves, is how I would describe it, and what I share in Infinite Receiving. There's a big kind of reset when it comes to our relationship with achieving. And I'm curious to hear, what is it in your life that has been so full of so many achievements that has led you to be in this position now, to be writing Free to Be? Give us the background. Where did it begin?
Yeah, and thank you for saying that about my background. I've known, and frankly, like in my 20s, all I did was striving for what people defined as success, and I achieved a lot, and I actually really loved what I did. I mean, I was just talking about the first time I got a check for producing, because I had been producing independent films and more in the artsy world, and at some point I decided to go more commercial because frankly I needed to make money. And I remember clearly getting that check for producing, and it made me so happy because I was aware that I completely manifested it. So I've always loved what I do, whether I am visual storytelling or running a show and all of that. I loved it. And only thing that was really missing is the the alignment of myself with what I was doing. I was so busy, and I wasn't even aware that I was so busy checking off everything that I believed that I needed to accomplish in order to be somebody. My mom would always say, be somebody. I later learned that she meant be somebody as in stand up for yourself, show the world who you are. But I thought be somebody really up until my, early 40s meant that I had to do all of these things. Anyway, I did a lot of things and I had a lot of fun doing them. And then at the end of 2013, I went through a major breakup with my partner of 13 years, and we were friends for 9 years prior to that, dear friends. So 22 years of love, friendship, commitment blew up in a 20-minute conversation. And at that time, our kids were 5 and 7, and it completely threw me for a loop. And at that time, I was on the executive team of a video shopping platform online, which was well ahead of its time, and successful in many ways. And I felt completely dead. I felt dead. Like some switch flipped, and it wasn't a good switch. I mean, it ultimately turned out to be a good switch, but just everything felt really meaningless to me. And I was really afraid of my state of mind affecting, well, certainly me, but also my kids as I was navigating the single mom world. And so I decided, I've always been, and I talk about it in the book, a half-ass spiritualist, kind of like window shopping spirituality, or calling upon the gods whenever I'm in trouble, like, please get me out of this. And I promise to believe in you. And then I get out of it and then forget because I'm,
because you're good.
Doing all of the earthly things. So I decided to dive in really, really deep into the spiritual journey. And I almost don't like calling it a spiritual journey, because as soon as you say that, people put in a category. It's really self-excavation, just like, why am I here? What am I doing? Does what is inside of me align with the world outside? I mean, pretty much all of your work. I was going through that quandary at the time. And so I really decided to dedicate the next 6 years. And of course, it's been ongoing to that discovery. And it completely shifted everything in my life. And I'm so grateful for it. And it wasn't easy. I think that a lot of people think that, when you step into this world, that it is, this kind of like soft landing. And my journey was anything but that, but so worth it. So worth it.
Okay, you said a lot in there, and I would love to just backtrack a little, because something really stood out. Actually, many things did, but one thing particularly around your relationship. You said that you'd been with your partner ultimately for 22 years, friendship, and then in intimate partnership, and then everything blew up in a 20-minute conversation. And I'm curious about that. I was saying literally today that when and I'd heard this from a guy who's a real baller, and I forget his name, but he is the creator of 75 Hard, but it really stuck with me. He said that when people get off track, They don't get off track for days or weeks or months. It is, in fact, years. And so I'm curious to get to that place where your relationship dissolves in this phone call. On reflection, had you guys been veering off track for years, or did it genuinely come out of the blue for you?
No. And it wasn't a phone call. It was a sit down conversation. Literally put the kids to bed and came upstairs and cracked open a couple of beers, sat in the living room, and she said, "I think it's time we part ways." And no, there's history behind that. There's definitely history behind that. Hearing those words really felt like a strange analogy, but it's that intimate. It felt like my mom saying, I just don't feel like being your mom anymore. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like it was that surreal. It just like, so no, in hindsight, in reflection, it was years in the making. I mean, I could see in the book, I talk about my Walking Dead years. Everything leading to that moment was my Walking Dead years. It's just me checking out. And it's so interesting to me because if you saw my life at the time, I mean, we had this like McMansion in Sonoma, California, with a little vineyard, and people would come to it. I'm like, oh my God, you must be in bliss. And I'm like, I'm losing my mind. So again, externally, everything looked great. Internally, I was, I could totally see how we drifted. And, and there was some attempts to reconciliation or, finding our way back, but it wasn't strong enough. And it ultimately, leading to that 20-minute conversation, nothing after that. I mean, it was just, that was it. And so no, it was a long time coming, and much like everything else in my life, or a good majority of my life, I just wasn't aware of it. And the crazy thing is that I prided myself on my awareness and such. So,
and this is, I think, for the work that I do, and personal work, and then also client work, I think that this is one of the most challenging things, because we work in a personal development space and everybody prides themselves on their self-awareness. If everybody was as self-aware as me, then this world would be a different place. And you said that the only thing missing was my alignment. And I thought that was interesting, because the way that alignment is frequently referred to in my world is, when things are not right because you on the inside don't feel good. You feel misaligned. Like it is a huge flag. Like if we're talking red flags, your personal alignment would be the biggest one. And so it's really interesting to me that whilst you call it your Walking Dead years now, at the time for you, it felt fine.
Yeah. I mean, and frankly, I would be bold enough to say that I think that the majority of people in this world live that way. Like we manage, it's sort of like rearranging furniture in our homes, but it's still the same furniture in the same home, and I do think that it is very possible, it's sort of, and it's a bit of an extreme, but sort of like alcoholism, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't know that you have an issue with alcohol up until the time you're aware of it. And then once you're aware of it, you can't unthink it, right? But
Sure.
it takes a really long time to get there. And
Yeah.
I was in that space, not with alcohol, but with
Yeah.
my life, for sure.
I think that what is also true is that when things are good enough and when things are fine and when you are living in the mansion on top of the hill and you've got the vineyard and you've got the kids and everything is like good enough, who the hell are you to throw a hand grenade in everything and say, actually, I feel a little bit misaligned, or actually, I want something more? And I think that we struggle with that idea as well. When before the grenade, because in an ideal world, we want to support people before they hit rock bottom. There's this idea that everything it has to be so painful before you're ready to move. I don't want people to have to get into that position. And so I'm curious about your thoughts on how do you give yourself permission? How do you notice when you're just playing in the space of good enough when there is
Yeah, and I
exquisite
think
for you?
that's a really, really, really good conversation, even though I joke that I do my best work on my knees because,
Yeah.
the Rumi saying, the
Hmm.
scar is where the light comes in.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. I believe that there has to be an opening in order for us
Mm.
to receive. I mean, hopefully it's not a scar, but there needs to be an opening. And you're absolutely right that when we live these cushy lives or have a cushy job, which
Mm.
is often referred to as the golden handcuffs,
Yes.
where there isn't really a reason for us to dig deeper, and we often do when we're at that crossroad, whether it's a
Mm.
divorce or a loss of some sorts. So the first part of my book is dedicated to finding your inner fire and
Mm.
aligning, because we so often hear, especially in the self-help world, to look within. But
Yeah.
most people, when we look within, like, what do we see? We see to-do lists. I mean, like, you talk to somebody who has never done any of the self-development work and tell them to look within. It's like, well,
Yeah.
how do you look within?
Yeah.
So I spend the first part of the book excavating.
Mm.
So first chapter is all about mind detox, because that's the part of us that F's with us the most.
Yeah.
The second chapter is about heart detox, and uh, really about acknowledging your emotions, but not allowing your emotions to drive the bus, because we
Mm.
often get our hearts and our souls mixed up. There's a reason why the heart is called the inner child. I call it the inner puppy. You want to tend to it, you want to acknowledge it, but you don't want it to drive the bus. That's the work of the soul. So I talk a lot about that, and who is in your world, that it's really important to really handpick the people that you spend your
Mm.
time with. So I talk a
Could
lot
you?
about how to, yeah.
I was just going to say, can you describe the soul? Because I think that soul and our spirit, these are things that are talked about a lot. How does somebody distinguish between the soul and the heart voice?
Well, it's interesting because in chapter 5 of my book, I also talk about the difference between soul and spirit. So
Mm.
the difference between soul and heart.
Mm.
Our heart is our container of emotions, right? We've got the primary, the basic emotions, and then we've got the complex emotions, and we attribute that all to the heart. And the heart is a lovely, sweet, lovable entity within us, our inner child. But it's also super finicky, It likes one thing 1 hour, and then it gets its emotions hurt, and then is like pouty and wants to curl up and take a nap. And like, that's our heart. So why would we want to follow that? Whereas in our soul is our unique and wise signature in this universe. That's what we look to. And it's interesting. I actually got the distinction at, and you talk about name it to tame it, but I think distinctions are really important. And I did this program called the Hoffman process. I don't know if you
I've heard
know
of it.
it.
Yeah, I haven't done it,
And
but
yeah, and really surreal and amazing. And it's this 1 week immersive and, very typical. You can't be, you can't use your phone. There's no Wi-Fi and all of that, which is amazing. But they talk a lot about the difference between the heart, the body, the mind, and our soul, which they call the Holy Quadrinity. And so the four work together, and then the spirit. And what I talk about the soul and the spirit is not necessarily the Hoffman process, but how I see it, and something that really resonates in that if our soul is our unique signature in the universe, the spirit is what connects all of our souls together. And that's the difference. So when we talk about the spirit, it's sort of like, well, where is my place in it? But then when you talk about the soul and the spirit and the dance between the two, it's gorgeous. I mean, it's stunning. It's like, okay, well, the universe is really big, but I play a part in it.
Yeah.
So
I love
hopefully that defines
my
it.
language, spirit, I would describe as universal intelligence. It's the universal wisdom that we get to tap in, and it's the golden thread that runs through every sentient being thing on the planet. And yeah, I think that the soul I refer to as the inner voice. It's that part of us that we get to use as our inner compass. And actually, when we're listening to that over and above the mind, which is great for problem solving, but we tend to default to the mind rather than the inner voice or our soul way too frequently.
And what's really interesting, I mean, you could take it back to, you could take it back to our childhood, right? You look at children and toddlers, and like you could almost see their soul radiating, right? And then really pretty early on, we start, whether it is detaching or disassociating from our souls, because the ego comes in, and we are taught this is right and this is wrong, and we start playing by the rules of this world.
Our parents.
And correct. And which is, that they inherited from their parents and so forth. So we start playing the earth game and move slowly away from our souls. And everyone does that to various degrees. So the reclamation of one's soul takes some serious excavating. It isn't just like, close your eyes and spend the next 5 minutes meditating.
Yeah.
It takes some doing. And the work, again, I like expectation setting is really important. Like, it isn't tranquil music and, sitting there and discovering, like, it was dark and scary and confusing and all of that. But, you hear a lot about, Siddhartha becoming the Buddha. You just sit with it and you let it move through you, and you discover. And, going back to, talking about how being in the self-development leadership space it's often not talked about how we are also evolving, how we are, who Susie was 10 years ago versus now is different. Who you were 1 year ago is different than you are now, but we almost don't even talk about it. And what's beautiful about the kind of soul evolution, if you want to call it, is, there's a reason that the Buddhists use the lotus as the symbol, because it's ever opening, it's ever evolving. So the more we evolve, the next layer shows up. So how Susie showed up with her issues, 10 years ago is extremely different than now, because
Thank the
you
Lord.
continue to evolve. And
Thank
and
the Lord.
the same for me, It's not like my problems go away. I mean, I have two teenagers, screenagers, and sometimes the interactions are surreal.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, all right. But I meet it at a completely different space. Yeah. And that to me is evolution.
100%. It's interesting.
I've digressed.
Well, no, but I think that it's important. When I have a 13-year-old, we're just about to turn 13-year-old son. And so many of the activations that happen between myself and him are memories from when I was that age. Like his growth and his evolution takes me back to when I was 13, when I was 14, and the drama, the pain, the hurt, the frustration, and the desire to protect him from all of that, and the fears of seeing him moving into what is a normal part of life and growing and learning and living, but wanting to just protect him so much, because it's so easy for me to still access all of those feelings. And that is part of the work. And I think that that's why, for those of us who have children, they're such incredible teachers, because they will show you, they will zone in and narrow in without even thinking about it, exactly where you have still got to do the work, no matter how aware you think that you are. It's like, I love you and so I get it.
Absolutely. My son who is 17 right now is my biggest teacher, biggest challenge and the biggest teacher. Like, okay,
yeah,
all right.
I think the saving grace, and I'm yet to be at that stage, but I remember getting old enough to realize that I was not a particularly fantastic teenager, and that that I had some work to do. So if he is in that space, I think that there's time for them to realize that we're human beings and that we're all just doing our best with what we have. And I think that the moment I realized that about my parents, it changed things. It was part of my growing and evolution. So yes, children. I want to ask you.
Yeah, there's
No, go.
Oh, I was just saying. I just recalled the popular Ram Dass saying, that we're all just walking each other home.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Can I read something to you?
Yeah.
I just read. It's a James Baldwin quote, and you've probably heard it, but it was one of the last things that I read last year, and I was just like, this is so profound. It says, "The longer I live, the more deeply I learn that love, whether we call it friendship or family or romance, is the work of mirroring and magnifying each other's light." How gorgeous is that? So yeah. So my son and I are in the process of mirroring and magnifying each other's light, and my daughter as well. She's just easier. Did I say that publicly?
You said that out loud. We won't edit it out, but they won't listen. So it's fine.
That's fine. He knows it. and so does
I
she.
I would love to ask you about soul work. What would you describe as soul work that can help us unlock the secrets of our souls and our unique blueprints?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the second part of my book is dedicated to just that.
Mm,
Like when you spend this time excavating your, detoxifying your mind and your heart and your body, and you reach a place where you are now connected with your inner fire, your inner
mm,
voice, as you call it. But what do you do with it? How do
yeah.
you live that out loud? So, chapter 4 of the book is all about play, and it's really interesting. In speaking with the book came out in June of last year, and pretty much unanimously in speaking with people who the book really resonated with, it's the chapter on play that
Mm,
seems to resonate the most.
yeah.
And I discovered the joy of play in my deepest, darkest moment.
Mm,
And it was by chance. And I won't go into that too much, but I rediscovered the joy of play as an adult. And now I am on a crusade of sorts to infuse play into the workplace and into relationships and into schools, and by schools I don't mean elementary schools, I mean colleges,
mm.
academia. And I truthfully feel that there is no greater direct way of exercising one's soul than through play, and play can look all sorts of ways, which I talk about in the book. So that's one way. It's basically active. You could think of it as active meditation, active manifestation, active love.
Okay.
And then chapter 5 of the my book, I talk about finding one's true north and the dance between the soul and the spirit. And chapter 6 is finding one's ikigai. And do you know the concept of ikigai?
No, fill us in.
So ikigai is a Japanese term and a Venn diagram for finding one's purpose in living, one's raison d'être.
Hmm.
And if you look at the diagram, which I have in the book, but you could just Google ikigai, and it's spelled Ikigai. There's nothing icky or male about it. It's just called ikigai. um, and it combines what you are good at with what you are passionate about,
Mm.
with what the world needs,
Okay.
and what you make money at. So that is,
Okay.
frankly, the definition of manifesting, right? Like you combine those things in order to find your purpose, and so I use that Venn diagram to really set people on their way to
Mm.
living their life from the inside out. And I'm
I'm
leaving
curious.
out a bunch of things, obviously, but that's a summary.
Yeah, I'm curious about the play. How do you go from your deepest, darkest depths to stumbling into play, kind of almost accidentally?
So, in the early days of, that's a really good question. And I don't think anyone's asked me that.
Yay.
So, um, so in the early days, when one is sick or just goes through a breakup or whatever, there are certain, family members and friends that show up, right?
Mm.
And I kind of had my meal train and all of that because I became really dysfunctional for a good period of time before I could actually function in the world.
Mm.
um, and And I mean dysfunctional as in like I was still taking care of my kids and I was still going to work, but I was completely checked out because
Yeah.
I was in, I don't know if it's PTSD mode or in shock and awe. Anyway, I spent a lot of time staring at the ceiling
Mm.
and like, this can't be my life. Like, how did I end up here? And and one of, well, a few of my friends, but one friend in particular, Michelle, we you sit down there on the couch with a cup of tea, and you have all these discussions with your friends. My friend Michelle's like, "F that, we're going out." But we're not like going out and like hitting the bars. We'd like go to a playground. There was a swing in Tiburon,
Okay.
which is like 20 minutes away from it and very close to her, that is a giant swing on this hill. And when you swing, it really feels like, hey, you could see Golden Gate Bridge, and it feels
Mm.
like you're actually swinging into the bay.
Yeah.
So we would have our conversations going down slides, doing seesaws, being on swings, skipping down the street. We would do mischievous things. And it brought me so much joy.
Yeah.
I just, and at that time I wasn't even, I'm like, am I just recalling my childhood or what is it? But it was my soul just like, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for allowing me to do this. And so I started doing more of it and then started looking into the concept of play. And I had, the good fortune of spending the afternoon with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Stuart Brown, who is
Mm.
known as the godfather of play, and he does an amazing TED Talk, and he also founded the Institute, National Institute of Play. It is a
Cool.
thing, and talked about the 8 different play personalities. And again, definition is really, really important. So I figured out what my play personalities were. I'm a combination of 3 of them, and then played accordingly. And it has completely shifted my life, And what's really interesting is to run my business
Hmm.
while incorporating play has been a game changer as well.
This is very interesting to me because for a long while as a mother, there was a lot of mum guilt because I didn't enjoy playing. I didn't enjoy
Mhm.
playing with Barbies. I was kind of okay with Legos, but I really felt like I am not a good mum because I don't love playing. Then I got permission actually from a coach who was like, well, if you don't like playing with Barbies, don't play with Barbies. Like, what do you like doing? And that was very freeing. What I like doing, my kids would probably describe as embarrassing them. I would describe it as like great fun. Like the most fun thing for me to do when I go to London is to get in one of the tuk-tuks where the guys are like riding on their bicycles. I plug in my phone, we blast the music out. It'll be some kind of like 90s hip hop R&B that we play in the car. The kids will be in the back of the tuk-tuk with me and I will just sing at the top of my voice. And it is so fun. Like for me, that is playtime. And they might moan, but also I know that they are the core memories that they are going to take away. Like once I've gone, it's those types of things, those peak experiences that they will remember, even if they have a little bit of a cringe. But I am hearing about the 8 different play personalities. That's really interesting to me. I'm like, oh, which personality am I that doesn't like Legos but does like maybe exhibitionism kind of in high adrenaline
Yeah, I mean,
states? I don't know.
yeah, what you what you described with the tuk-tuk and the singing, I would say would put you, it's a combination of the explorer because you're in tuk-tuk and you're going somewhere, and
Yes.
probably the artist, the creator, who really enjoys listening to music and
Yes.
like exploring the arts.
That is me.
I mean, there's a
Yeah.
whole.
That is me. I
You could
mean, travel
actually,
is play for me. Travel, like not being able to get on a plane, like at least
yeah,
once every couple of months, like that hurts my
I'm the
soul. And
same.
that's what I would say.
I'm the same.
Like my
Yeah,
soul is hurting. Like I need to explore. I need to get on a plane. That makes me happy.
yeah.
Oh wow! I have now a new
You're
understanding
definitely
of
the
what play
explorer.
is.
Yeah, and it's
Mm.
interesting because when you look into it, and I mean, I'm giving talks about it.
Yeah,
I'm developing an online course on play. I'm calling it Recess, which hopefully will be available in about a month. But
amazing.
it's really important to figure out what our play personality is. Like, for example, there's the collector. I'm a total
Yeah.
minimalist. So the idea
Uh-huh.
of collecting is like, there's also the director, you know, like I spend between being a mom and a professional, I can manage and coordinate and produce all day long, but that does not ring play to me. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
got
I'm
it.
definitely not the director. That's not my play personality.
Yeah.
And I'm not a collector, you know, and there are sprinklings of other things that I may be. But it's important to find that out, not just because of, you know, how you can play and find joy and all of that, but then also finding your playmates, right? So if you
Yes.
are together with your spouse and he or she is a collector, you know, or which I think that the Barbie part would probably fit into the collector, like, you know, I've got, you know, and the
Yeah.
Legos, like, yeah, like pieces, and I feel the same. So if he or she is into collecting and you are into exploring, is there something that you can both do, you
Combine.
know? So like
Yes.
you travel to Italy to go to see a special collection of something, and either
Mm.
you join him or her, and you know what I mean, but then you actually
Yeah.
know, rather than
Got it.
sitting there and be like, I hate Barbies, I hate Barbies.
Yeah.
I'm doing it for you.
Yeah. Oh, I love this so much. Shirin, I could literally speak to you for a good few hours. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, but I have some quick fire questions that I am asking all of my guests in celebration of the launch of the Infinite Receiving book. And I would love to ask you these questions too. So, first up, what does infinite receiving mean to you?
Infinite receiving to me is the dance between the soul and the spirit, having our souls, freeing our souls enough to align with the universal consciousness, as
Mm.
you mentioned, awareness, and and dancing, playing.
Yeah. How good are you at it?
You know, I think that I have gotten really good at it, and it also depends on the day.
Mm.
So when I have a bad day, I allow
Yeah.
myself to have a bad day and don't beat myself up for it because I'm
Yeah.
so evolved and I've done all this work and yada, yada, yada. I'm like, okay, Shireen, give yourself a break. You're
Yeah.
having a bad day and just
Yeah.
call it. So I think that I am 90% really good at it. And
Yeah.
sometimes I really suck at it.
Yeah. And 10% human. Yeah. Got it.
Correct.
One of the pillars of infinite receiving is the infinite pillar of love. So I really, that quote that you shared from James Baldwin, I absolutely loved. And I am curious, where or who in your life right now could you allow to love you just a little bit more?
Who I would allow to love me a little bit
Mm.
more.
Who wants to give you some love that maybe you cut them off just consciously, unconsciously?
It's yet another question no one has asked. I would actually say, and I'm saying it publicly, I would say my ex. I mean, we've learned to co-parent really well, but in when in my heart chapter, I have this thing called the taser, shield, filter, or hug category, and I put people in those categories. And for a long time, she used to be in the taser category.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, and then she moved into the shield, and now she's in the filter. And the filter has more to do with ourselves, as like not oversharing with everybody, and I might be open to a hug from her. We're in that space. Other than that, I try very, very hard to minimize any sort of animosity in my life, and I can't say I'm void of it, because I think that's just part of the human experience.
Yeah.
But how I meet it is really different, and I also. We talk about frequencies. I talk about channels. Like if something is in my life that is bringing me a lot of pain, I don't ignore it, but I change the channel. So I know the channel is there and I can get to it and do get to it, but I don't have it on in the background all the time. So I literally change the channel.
Powerful. What is your greatest attribute? And this, I think, in relation to your work, I talk about us knowing our greatness and our own unique blueprint. And so from your working with your soul, what do you know to be your greatest attribute?
I think my greatest attribute is being deeply human. I think that my interest in other humans is going beyond, below, with whatever that is, to a deeper level with other humans.
Yeah.
And I'm less impressed. I mean, whatever, people's accolades and such can be impressive, but I love to sit down and get to know someone, as you and I are doing, on a soul level.
Yeah.
And that comes naturally to me now. And I feel it's a gift. It's a gift for me, and hopefully it's the gift that I'm sharing with the world.
Yeah, I love it. What are you consciously working on manifesting?
It's a big one. So I spent this last year rebranding of sorts, because it's different if you have a Brene Brown, for example, who, does the research and then shares it with the world, and it really resonates. It's different when you come from the content creation side, and that is basically my past. It's producing and executive producing and being a media executive and all those bloated titles, but truthfully it's content creation and a lot of visual storytelling and shifting into the space of thought leadership and self-development leadership.
Yes.
And putting that stake in the ground. And so that is, I'm in that place, and I'm so much more, so much further in that transition than I was a year ago, for sure. Yeah. But I'm still in it. I think that I haven't Googled myself for a while, but when I did previously, it was just, producer, media executive, executive producer, and, the various projects that I've worked But I looked at some point, and because of all the podcasts and all the interviews and the book and all of that, and the speaking engagements, I am now seen as a transformational leader, and that brings me tremendous joy. So that is what I continue to manifest.
The work is working. Final question. Where can you allow yourself to be supported in your life just a little bit more right now?
I would say in my vulnerability. I think that as we present ourselves as thought leaders in this space,
yes,
I find it more challenging, not necessarily to be vulnerable or myself, but when issues come up, for example, what we talked about with my amazing son, to really talk about the challenges that I'm facing, and have that be okay. Have it be okay that even though I am in such a different space than I was 10 years ago, that I am ever evolving, you know? And I think that when we get to this arena, there's an expectation, or at least what I see as an expectation. I could be wrong, that we're supposed to have it all figured out, rather than us being that much further along.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's changing, but I feel that I would love to have more support from, frankly, other thought leaders in a really vulnerable space, like creating that safe space with one another, which doesn't always happen.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for such a rich conversation today. I would love for you to share with my listeners where they can find out more about you and your work and buy Free to Be. Please share.
So Free to Be, the book, can be found anywhere that books are sold, whether it's the Amazons or Barnes & Noble. Please do check your independent bookstores, because I do like supporting them. And you could find me. My name isn't the easiest to spell, but everything in my social is my name. So at Shirin Etessam, everything, and my website is shirinetessam.com. Try to make it as easy as possible.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you have loved this podcast as much as I have, please do me a favor. Hit me up in my DMs. Hit Shirin up in her DMs. Let us know what your number one takeaway was, and share this episode with a friend and help us get the message of soul work and play out into the world in an even bigger way. And in the meantime, I'll see you next time. And please remember that faith plus action equals miracles. Thank you for listening to Infinite Receiving with me, Susie Ashworth. I'd love to share with you my Infinite Receiving activation audio. Go to susieashworth.com/activate infinite receiving.